Hi, my name is Patty, and I created this channel, Life Uncomplicated, to help people simplify mental health and mental well-being by understanding how the mind really works. And today I want to talk about resilience. Now, the reason I want to talk about resilience is because I think that I really misunderstood it for a very long time. And for a while, I had this idea that, people would say kids are really resilient. And I was a little cynical. And my thought was, well, let me ask you this. If kids are so darn resilient, how come adults are so effed up? A little cynical on my part, I know. But it seemed like it made sense to me. We as adults don't seem to be quite as resilient. Why are kids resilient? Or if kids are resilient, then why do they grow up to not be resilient? It didn't make sense to me. And what I've realized recently, really realized recently, is that adults are just as resilient as kids. The difference is that adults think more than kids, and we tend to take our thinking way more seriously than kids do. So, given that, I guess I can understand the idea that kids are resilient. Kids tend to just live more in the now, at least at very young ages, until they start to do a lot more thinking. Now, some people might argue that for some kids, it's the situations they live in, and I totally understand that. There are some kids that live in some pretty deplorable situations, and I am not discounting that in any way, shape, or form. But in the day-to-day, moment-to-moment scenarios, kids tend to not overthink things as much as adults do. And we adults, when we have a problem, the first thing we do is we go up into our heads and try to figure out the problem, as if doing more thinking would help us find an answer. And a lot of times it doesn't work that way. I was just talking with my father last night, and he said he was trying to solve a problem, and he said, I went to bed, and in the middle of the night, I woke up with an idea to solve my problem. He said, it happens like that all the time. I solve my problems in my sleep. And I kind of laughed, and I was like, well, yeah, that's how the mind works. When we leave a problem alone, we tend to be able to find an answer. And a lot of people will say they find their answers in the shower, that's me, or when they're driving. I had a boss that used to say that. In fact, that used to be true for me too. Taking a walk, playing with their kids, whatever the case may be. It's whenever you kind of let your mind go. You don't hold on to an idea and try to figure it out up in your little intellect. We tend to have more bandwidth when we're not up in our heads trying to figure things out. And if you notice, kids don't do that quite as much as adults do. So anyway, the reason I want to talk about this is because resilience, to my mind, is a built-in capacity that we all have. And sometimes I think people get a little upset if they feel like they're being told they should be resilient or that everybody bounces back. And maybe they've had a situation in their life that they're struggling to bounce back from, and then therefore they may feel a little slighted because they're not bouncing back, and therefore, you know, don't tell me I should bounce back. And I get that. I would understand that completely. I wouldn't want to be told that either if I felt like I was struggling with a situation. But here's what I want to offer about resilience. Resilience is built in. It is innate. We all come with the capacity to be extremely resilient. The one thing that we miss is the fact that we're thinkers. And because we're thinkers, we tend to overthink things. And when we overthink things, we kind of move away from our natural resilience. So let's just imagine you're carrying a really big bag of rocks. And you've probably heard this before, and if you haven't, cool. You're carrying a really big bag of rocks, and you're holding it for a really long time. It gets heavy, and the longer you hold it, the heavier it feels, right? Well, the minute you put it down, you feel lighter. Well, it makes sense, right? Well, same kind of thing happens when we ruminate and we perseverate and we overthink about a situation. Because we feel our thinking, the more we think it, the more we feel it, the heavier it feels. What's the solution? Put it down. And the moment we put it down, we feel lighter. We give ourselves some mental bandwidth and creative ideas pop in. It's just how the mind works. It's nothing special. It's nothing that you have to work at. It's something you already have. The question is, do you notice it? And when you notice it, do you kind of think of it as a one-off or a fluke, or do you recognize that that's your innate capacity? That's how your mind works. How cool is that? And as the old saying goes, the more you focus on something, the more you get of it. Yes? Well, the more you focus on your innate capacity for resilience, the more resilience you will tend to get. So there's not, to my mind, there's no technique, there's no hack, there's no way of getting more resilience. It's actually noticing the resilience you have, even if it's just a tiny bit, and keep noticing it. And the more you notice it, the bigger it will get, the more it will show up, the faster it will show up. Hopefully this makes sense, because it's something that I've discovered and it has helped me immensely in every area of my life. Whenever I start to feel heavy, when I catch on to it, I realize I'm overthinking a situation. As soon as I realize it, I let it go. As soon as I let it go, I feel lighter. And as soon as I feel lighter, the way to solve the problem generally presents itself. Does that sound familiar? Have you noticed that in your life? If you have, keep noticing it. If you notice that you're thinking it's a one-off or a fluke, question that. Question that, because it may not be a one-off or a fluke. It may just be the way the mind works. All right. I hope that was helpful. I look forward to coming out and talking with you about another topic. We'll talk to you soon.